Greetings, Woodsians and School of Lifers. Welcome to the next in the series of business analysis webinars. As always, I learned everything I know about business analysis, and I think of it in terms of my experience of doing computer simulation for a long time in a lot of industries for a lot of different applications in many different architectures. If you ever have any questions about any of that, there are tons of materials on my website or ask me. Also, these slides are prepared and hosted in the reveal.js framework, and so they are include live links. So feel free to follow those to more information wherever you see them. So the question is, why use business analysis? What's the benefit? I've described what it is. And really the question is, what's the value proposition? It's amazing how much verbiage you can spout out without really making the value proposition clear. So I want to take a crack at that in this talk. So the question is, why should organizations use business analysis methods and techniques, and what's the difference between them? Hopefully I'll remember to answer that second question. What does business analysis do that other practices don't? What qualities should individual BAs have? What do BAs actually do? And what benefits can BAs bring at different levels of experience? In general, more is better, but what are the details? So let's look at some answers. So what does the practice do that others don't? I actually compare practices to other practices in number 11 of this series. But let's talk about what some of the practice bodies do and some of the suboptimal behaviors and chicanery they might engage in. So you have to remember that they're run by human beings, and I mean the PMI and the IIB and all the other certifying bodies. Mostly they're terrific and honest and try to put out good information. But every now and then, some people will get in charge who think it's more about marketing and more about bringing in the dollars than it is about putting out good information. Also, they may be slaves to the whim of the moment. For example, a lot of people think most of the material in the project management has been overcome by Agile. They think Agile solves everything. And most of what we were doing can be thrown out. Well, maybe 760 pages of practice information in volume 6 of the PMBOK is maybe a little bit of overkill, but jettisoning half of that to say Agile does everything might not be a good move. So I read and am familiar with the material in volumes 4, 5, and 6 since I got my PMP, which is the PMI big certification, one among many. And all the information in there is solid and remains mostly true, even if you're doing Agile. Now, much of the PM move was really conceived for waterfall, but in fact, project management has been going on since they were building pyramids. So none of this is really new. And different practice bodies made their certifications more difficult to earn for a lot of different reasons. Like the certified financial analyst, which my dad had, and at least one of my friends have. They keep making that harder so it means something. And the question is, for me, are you running a service that's trying to provide good information, or are you running a cartel? Because in general, I say this often, I'm not interested in being part of a cartel, even if it benefits me. It's just the wrong way to go. I'm all about good, honest information and helping people do the best job possible in each area. So I compared and contrasted business analysis to many other practice areas a few weeks back, and I could have included even more particular different kinds of architecture, but mostly I'm probably comparing and contrasting to project management right now. So I think that project management is a wrapper that business analysis operates within. So project management is mostly about the resources and managing progress and tracking things and making sure you have the money and people and whatnot. And then business analysis is really about identifying the requirements and solving the actual problem. So they work together. There are certain overlaps having to do with the resources, but there are different emphases. So the PMs and BAs should work hand in hand, and sometimes they can be the same people. So Agile does not obviate any of the material in the PMBOK or the BABOK. Managing resources is managing resources, and solving problems and identifying requirements is what it is. That doesn't change no matter what management paradigm you're using. So what qualities should individual BAs have? That is supposed to be a question mark. I'll edit that. BAs are learning and translating machines. So they're always learning what goes on what their customers are doing, what's available to create solutions, and learning how to do their jobs better, how to communicate better, more about the business analysis, and so on. And they're also translating machines. So what they're trying to do is talk to business people and people who have problems, and also talk to implementers of various kinds that often are doing software and computer and IT-based things, but aren't always. So the practitioner and the solver, you have to, they can't always talk to each other directly. Now, a good solver or implementer should be able to ideally talk to the people whose problems they're trying to solve, but that's not always the case. So when I was younger in my career, I served in both roles, both translator and implementer, but bees have someone taken over the role of translating, and that depends on the size and scope of the organization and the relationship, whether you're doing internal customers or external, and many other factors. The other quality they should have is being curious, basically, about the people and what they need in processes. So what they're doing in the tools involved in their industry, in their organization, and so on. They should have strong communication skills to do the translating, including active listening, and you should always have empathy for what people are going through in all their different roles. They ought to be able to talk to people in every role, from the non-technical line worker up to people in the C-suite, and they ought to be able to talk to each other using language in the mode that they understand and is appropriate. So when you're talking to line SMEs, you can talk to them in detail. And when you talk to C-suite people, you generally have to give them the top line and give them more details when they ask. So it's a question of understanding your context. You need to be able to use a wide range of collaboration tools to keep everybody in sync and share information, and expressive tools for documenting your findings and what's been agreed to, and so on, to develop shared understanding. There are a lot of ways to do this. I love Visio and other graphic tools. A picture is worth 1,000 words. And animation is 1,000 pictures. And I pretty much throughout my career have lived by making process maps. I've also worked in a lot of industries by choice that are process type industries. So what do BAs actually do? Well, they actually know the practice of business analysis, and they use the materials within that practice to get people to work together and solve problems. So just like Scrum Masters are responsible for getting their teams to understand and follow good Scrum practice, BAs will do the same thing. And here I've remembered to differentiate between procedures and techniques. So the way the BABOK is broken down, there are some other contextual things, but the two major parts of it are the knowledge areas, which is the 6 practice areas that kind of walk you through how to identify, break down, manage requirements, and identify and evaluate solutions. So that's the problem solving part. And then the techniques, the PABOK includes 50 of them that are specific things you can do to help you develop solutions and help you efficiently carry out engagements. Some techniques are good for doing both those things. So the other thing that BAs do, the next thing is discover what's going on inside existing systems, if there are any. And you do that, you build a conceptual model of what's going on through processes of discovery and data collection. I've talked about both of these at length, and you develop a full understanding of the language you use, the specific terms, and what data is available, and what all the items mean. And then you find out what people need in their language, but you help them break it down so it's in enough detail to actually do something with. So I'm going to read this one verbatim. You want to ensure express requirements, which are an abstract form of the to be state, are fully captured and then effectively translated into properly contextualized action items that, when completed, will achieve the capabilities and results that are truly needed. So hopefully I managed to put the right emphases in there, and I'll get back to that in a little more detail in a bit. So the next phase, once you've identified requirements, is to come up with a range of designs that solve the problem. And you also help identify the criteria by which they'll be judged and the best one chosen. Now, it's not always true that people will consider a lot of different ways to solve a problem. Sometimes the solution is fairly obvious. Sometimes you're as a vendor is severely limiting the kinds of solutions that can be offered. Those are fine. So you should operate in the way that makes sense for your context. Now, the BA, obviously, it's better if they know more, but they don't necessarily need to be a subject matter in all those areas, but they should know how to get the best information and contributions out of the SMEs. So you then ensure that all the design items are implemented and tested and accepted and deployed. And deployed means rolled out as needed. Training is conducted. Maintenance procedures and management procedures are implemented, and so on. So they should be aware of all that. And then make sure everything through all the different phases, and I've talked about my 6 phases, which are restatements of what's in the bat box that I think are a little bit easier to follow. I talked about traceability in a previous presentation, so go back and consult that. So if you do this, you make sure all the items in each phase line up with each other. All the work you do is responsive to the problem and the identified requirements, and you're not doing extra work or making things more complicated than you need. So how do we turn express requirements into something usable? And that goes back to that passage I quoted, which means contextualize action items that, when completed, will achieve the capabilities and results that are truly needed. So I recently encountered a list of requirements similar to those. I'll let you browse over those for a second, but then we'll talk about some of the characteristics that this list has. So what problems do you see? Because I see a few, and how can these be improved? So continuing on, I'm going to say that all those requirements are perfectly legitimate, but we often need more information. So they some of the requirements are very specific, like the one that says show item aging using different colors, the second one down. And then the first one says automate certain things, and that's too general. There's a lot of information needed to actually automate something. If I gave that list to an implementer or a group of implementers, which in this case might mean IT people or what have you, then what if I didn't tell them anything else, what are they likely to come back with? What are the chances it'll be the right thing that really solves your problem and gives you what you want and need? What kind of implementer should you talk to? Can the existing ones help? So you already have IT support. Can they fill in the holes? How many different implementers might you need? I mean, it would be great if one group could do everything for you and do the whole thing. And where should they be located? So if you have operations scattered all over the place, Should they have offices in the same locations as your facility? Should they travel? Who do they need to talk to? What do they need to see? Who do they need to have access to? Can you do this stuff remotely? Should you pay for travel? All those are valid questions. And what skills do they need? And what technologies do they need to have command of? So we need more information in order to answer those questions. Here's how we get in. So first of all, we need to know what's going on now. What's happening, where is it happening, and who is doing it? Who is making it happen? So the best way to do that is by creating a process map or other description or descriptions of what's going on now. There are a lot of different artifacts you can create to describe systems and requirements and designs and so on. I always like pulling them all together in a picture or one or more pictures, so there's a shared context for each. This gives everyone a shared understanding and shows where the holes are and how to fill them in. And everybody brings their own expertise to this process. Discovery gives you the nouns and verbs. I've talked about this previously, and that gives you the context do data collection, which characterizes all the things you discovered in detail. And without knowing what's going on in detail, any solutions you try to create are just guessing. So you need the actual details. So let's consider the level of detail that you need. So I love sharing this document, whether or not, or this image, whether or not you're using that particular tool for enterprise or other architecture. Understanding these three layers really was a major piece that finished off my understanding of how to do stuff. So you're simultaneously operating at three layers. You want to solve the problem kind of abstractly at the middle layer by figuring out what logically has to be done. And then in the technology layer, it's actually how to implement that logic, how you perform the calculations, what data you store and share and transmit and display, and so on at the technology layer, and what people in business units do things at the business layer. So you have to think about the requirements at all the layers in the right way. So you have to figure out what needs to be done in the middle and how it's going to be done in the bottom, and who's going to do it and be responsible in the top. I'd like to start by solving the problem in the middle and work out both up and down from there. And once you understand that, then you know how much detail you need to actually solve the problem and do the implementation. If you haven't figured out the calculations that need to be performed, the actions that need to be taken, and the data that needs to drive it, there's no point in implementing anything. And I taught at length in previous presentations about how to do all that, how to work through all the phases. So hopefully we have a good understanding of that by this point. And now we're talking about the value of doing it. So even with once we have an understanding of all that, we've really clarified the problem and know where to get more details and so on. We still need to write down the calculations and data items that are needed in the middle layer and give those in specifically described chunks to implementers that might be programmers, database experts, UI, UX people, and so on, so they can actually do the implementation. You can't just throw something at somebody and say, here, automate it. You have to say, do this calculation using these data items. Let people control it this way using this information you display. And you have to link that to items moving around in the physical world in a lot of cases. Specifically, the cases I highlighted in the list of requirements I gave a few pages back. So you have to get the right tools, the right communication, networking, computers, databases, programming languages, scanners, printers, and so on to make all this happen. And all the different practitioners need instructions specific to them so they can tie it all together. Now, again, this is an iterative process. You might not be able to write every single detail that they'll need. They should be able to ask you questions and get information as needed. So again, you're always iterating within and between phases. And then once the thing is set up and deployed and implemented, then everyone needs to be trained to use it and maintain it based on the role they're going to have within it. So it should be designed and documented so it's robust, understandable, modular, upgradable, and maintainable. And you need to stay in contact with the people who built the system so they can tell you about potential upgrades, software patches, and whatever. And they can go in and further upgrade or expand it as you need. And they can be external vendors or in-house staff as appropriate. So all that needs to happen. Life cycle of a system doesn't end when you get it deployed and start using it. Really, in a sense, only begins, because then you have to maintain it, babysit it, improve it, and expand it and so on over time. So none of this happens by accident. If you don't know where you're going, any road will get there. If you do know where you're going, you'll know exactly what roads to take and why, and you can prepare for taking them. And you will have the right people involved. So which method do you think will be cheaper and more likely to lead to success? Obviously, planning and breaking the problem down in an organized fashion is the way to fame and fortune. The cost of failing, what is that? You can do it right the first time, or you can do it over, or you can do it just not do it at all after failing. All those are bad outcomes. So if you remember the first Matrix movie, and that should be the only one anyone actually acknowledges, remember something Agent Smith says to Neo early on. One of these lives has a future. One of these does not. That's probably the best line of the movie. So, which life do you want? I personally want to take the red pill, go down the rabbit hole, and do everything right, and learn the details and really solve the problem from the ground up in an organized way, leveraging all my experience and the experience of all the participants. So let's talk about the benefits BAs can bring based on the amount of experience they have. People don't generally start out as BAs. They come from a lot of different backgrounds. As long as they have the qualities that I described earlier: curiosity, communication, interest, empathy, and so on, they can make pretty good BAs. So nobody generally goes out of school and is a BA on their first day of work in the actual world. They usually do something else first and then move into being BAs. And if they do that, they'll have some previous experience that will help with the process. A trained BA, one that's been around for a while, will have a reasonable sense of what to do and when. They obviously, if they have more experience, they'll be better, but they'll know the basics. They'll get you through. And obviously, a more senior BA will see more, know how to adapt to more. Goodness knows, I'm still learning, and I've been doing all this stuff and more for a long time. The longer people have been around, the more they'll know people, the more they'll know their industries and organizations and their specific and general technologies and methods, and they may have experience in other practice areas like software development and testing and acceptance, UI, UX design, different kinds of architecture, process improvement, agile type management, and so on. So the more you know, the better off you'll be. a really good BA like me, for example, will have experience in just about everything. And at that point, they're not really just a BA anymore. They're some kind of architect or senior consultant or something like that. And like I said, almost anyone can be a BA and start doing that work if they have the right qualities. So, how should BAs not be used? This is very important. So they shouldn't just be brought in to copy down requirements for a bunch of people and then sent away to do the same thing for another effort. They're sometimes used that way. I think organizations that do that are making a mistake. Really, what they should do is be involved in the whole life cycle so they can make sure the right steps are followed. The problem is solved completely in an organized way using all the best techniques of the practice and bringing all the participants and their various skills and knowledge and experience to bear in the most effective way. And that's what I have to say for this week. So basically, you can do it kind of randomly, or you can do things and solve problems effectively using tried and true practices with experienced practitioners. So, are there any questions? Let me bring the video back up.
I don't have any questions, but it was a good presentation.
Thank you. Hopefully, it will help the fellas I'm working with today. So I will see you at the tech call in a little while.